Hello again, so back to Paris Brest Paris, but to also bear in mind that if you're training for other longer events, backpacking events or other types of endurance cycling or even endurance running events, then what I'm going to say here is relevant, although in this particular video it's fairly specific to Paris Brest Paris. But you can use these principles for other events, so don't just click away. And if you've got questions about how you might use the ideas that I talk about for other types of events, then get in touch and make a comment, email me or whatever, and I'll help you out. I'm pleased to say that all the people that I'm working with towards Paris Brest Paris have successfully qualified, apart from one, and she's had all sorts of problems, all sorts of personal problems, so she never really got started, which is a real shame, but she's getting back on track and she's going to have a go next time. If you're not sure what the qualifying events are for Paris Brest Paris, then obviously you're not going to be doing it this year because you need to have qualified by now. But if you're looking to learn and or if you're doing another event and you might be interested, you have to do a 200, 300, 400 and 600 kilometre Audax within the year of the Paris Brest Paris event, and before the end of June roughly. I can't remember the exact dates, but obviously if you're doing it you've qualified. If you're not doing it, then the exact dates aren't that critical. Obviously this is quite an undertaking, so if you've done a 600 and a 400 recently, or one or the other, then obviously you need to take the time to recover. It takes time to recover from these long events, and you don't want to start training again until you're properly recovered and ready to build on the fitness you've developed by doing the series. So bear in mind, you will have developed a lot of fitness by doing the 200, 300, 400 and 600 kilometre events, and by taking the time to recover you'll get the adaptation and the fitness gains from those, so that when you are ready to start training you're building on a stronger base, and you're able to work hard in the last few weeks up to the event. So PBP starts on the 20th of August, which gives us about maybe 8 weeks before the event if you're watching this video when it comes out, and obviously less if you're watching it later. I do have a Paris Brest Paris training plan which was 24 weeks. I've cut that down to the last 6 weeks. So if you want that plan, you can get it on the website for, I think, set it for €20. I'll put a link in the description. And then if you've got any questions, you can just email me and I'll give you a little bit of help. So if you've really had to dig deep for the qualifying events, I know one of the people I work with that really he's just finished his 600, Nick. He's done an amazing effort, and but obviously it takes time to recover. He's pretty tough, so I think he'll recover quite quickly. But give yourself the time you need to recover, because everybody takes a different amount of time to recover. And if you're having to, if you're struggling, if you're not ready to start riding hard again, take the extra time, because that means your body's still adapting to the hard work it's done, and you're still building fitness that you can use when you get to the event. With only 6 to 8 weeks to go before the event, then obviously you can't make a lot of changes to your fitness. You can get a little bit faster, you can build your endurance a bit, but you need to pick, where are you going to be able to make your biggest gains, and focus on that, do that, and then whatever happens. So just think about where you think you can make the biggest gains, one gain, one improvement, and then focus on that, focus all your training on that. And in thinking about that, the difference between a 90-hour ride, if you're looking at the time limits, and a 40-hour ride that you've done in your qualifying with a 600 is very significant. Like, you can get away with very little sleep for 40 hours, but 90 hours is nearly 4 days. So you're going to need to have a different recovery strategy and break the ride up into components. And how much sleep you have, well, that depends on you and how fast you can ride, how much time you need to recover to continue riding at a given speed and sustain the effort until the end. If you look on the PBP website, then the ride's split up into nice stages between control points, so that can be, if that framework works for you, then it's perfect. And I was just chatting with Tony earlier on our Zwift ride. We do a Zwift ride Tuesdays and Fridays, and he was saying that that's his strategy. He just uses the controls, he builds up a bit of a buffer, and then he knows he can have a bit of sleep, and then he's reset the clock and he builds up another bit of a buffer, and then he can have another bit of sleep. When he's built up maybe 3 hours, he can get sort of 3 hours sleep. The other thing to bear in mind is that it's certainly in previous years that Tony had done the event, he was saying that the time limits are you have to ride quicker earlier on, so that you get you're allowed to slow down or you get more recovery. So if you get out to Brest in maybe 42 hours, then you've got 50 hours. If it was 40 hours, you'd have 50 hours to get back. So so if you keep that in mind, rather than rush to get a big buffer early on, bear in mind that you're automatically creating a buffer by the fact that the time limits get a little bit slacker as the event goes on. So with that in mind, you can create yourself some sort of time schedule based on your experiences of doing the series. Bearing in mind you might be a little bit fitter, you should be a little bit more recovered, and go with that, and hopefully it'll work. You could try to test it, but obviously it's really difficult to test because you can't actually do a 1200 kilometre ride now with only 6 weeks to go, because you'd be too tired. It doesn't make sense to do it, and why would you? Because that's what you're trying to do ultimately. So you can do some shorter rides, test it, but you'll never know really whether you can deal with that. And to some extent that's the reason for doing it, as you're heading into the unknown. One strategy might be to use the controls and the time limits, like I mentioned Tony does. He's an experienced Audax rider. But if you're an experienced bike packer, one of the better strategies for bike packing is to have a daily routine whereby you ride for a certain number of hours each day, including your stops. So your ride time might be 16 hours or maybe even 20 hours, given it's a fairly short event on less than 4 days. So you might aim to ride for 20 hours a day, have 4 hours sleep, ride for another 20 hours, or even ride longer durations if you're not such a fast rider. And that might be your timing strategy for the event, just to work on a duration-based schedule. I know one person I've talked to thinks that might work better for him. In terms of training over this last 6 weeks, then you could buy the training plan. Here it is. We can have a look at what the strategy is on that. So it's basically 2 harder sessions a week, or a hard session and a longer weekend. And the focus is on building threshold rides, which is focusing on developing your FTP. And of course you need a taper. If you're travelling, you need to account for that, take time off for that. If you're doing a long haul flight and you haven't booked your travel, then bear in mind that there's a certain risk of getting ill on long haul flights because you're in a sort of recirculated air environment, and there are a lot of germs flying about, so be careful. Take as many precautions as possible to avoid getting ill, and maybe travel a bit earlier so that if something does happen, you get a chance to recover from it. So if you've been doing a lot of training, if you've done a lot of volume in the last few weeks before the event, then you might need a 3-week taper. If you've been doing a bit less volume, say your 600 event was, if you've only just completed it, for instance, and then you're recovering, you could probably deal with a shorter taper because you've not got much training time. You might only have like 3 weeks training, and then you need your 3 weeks taper, or 4 weeks training and a 2-week taper, or whatever. If you feel you need to build endurance, a reasonable strategy might be to look at building 4-day blocks of training with 3 days of recovery. So you might do, if you're working full time, it can be a bit difficult, but one way you could do it is to say do an interval session on Thursday evening, which might be like a threshold type session, so you're trying to boost your FTP, and then do a tempo session on Friday after work, which would be a bit of a longer session, lower intensity, so because it's quite hard to do threshold session or VO2 max threshold type things. So the higher intensity things are quite hard to sustain, but you can often do a tempo session when you're a bit tired, and then do 2 long rides at the weekend, so that you then going into the weekend fairly tired, and you've got 4 days, and then recover on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then do it again, and then maybe have an easy week, so you're doing 2 weeks on, 1 week off, and then another week, and then you'd sort of be into your taper. Or if you start now, you might get 2 blocks of 3 weeks there. Or maybe you can manage 3 weeks and 1 week off. So obviously I'm rambling here, but you get the gist of it. You need to take the recovery time you need, but you could sort of build into these you can still be working full-time and have these 4-day blocks that might well work for you if you're looking to build up the endurance to ride for 4 days in a row. So that's pretty much it. 6 weeks to go. You can only really make one change. Make sure you include enough of a taper. Make sure you've recovered from your qualifying events. And if you're training for another type of longer event, you can use these principles to prepare and get ready. And I know there's a lot of things going on at the moment, so in fact, well, I've got quite a few people doing bikepacking events, PVP. And if you need any help, get in touch, and I would love to work with you, whether it's for a short period up to an event that's upcoming, or for your plans to do Paris Brest Paris when it comes around next time. And well, please subscribe and like, and thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.